Hi, I'm Anatole, and welcome to my review of Twilight Zone, the original series, Season 1, Episode number 13, titled The Four of Us Are Dying, based on a story by George Johnson, who is more well known for the story Logan's Run, the book and the movie. It was released January the 1st, 1960, so we are now officially into the 1960s. And it scored 7.2 on imdb.com from a vote total of about 2,300 votes, and that is a weak score. And I'm not going to delay or beat around the bush for my personal review on the episode. I didn't like it that much. I felt the different parts of the story didn't really hold together, and I think some of that has to do with the fact that, according to my research from the Twilight Zone book titled Twilight Zone: Unlocking the Door to a Television Classic, and I'll link to that in the show notes below, that this was an unpublished story that was solicited to Rod Serling because George Johnson knew someone in common with Rod Serling, and he was able to access Rod that way. And Rod Serling, because he was under contract to write the majority of the episodes, I want to say 75% of the episodes of Twilight Zone, he was under contract to write. I know it was majority, and that number 75% is the one that's in my head. But it's very hard to come up with original ideas week after week for 18 episodes out of a 24 episode season. So he would also buy stories from other writers to just give him ideas, and then he would take those and liberally adapt them to the screen. And some of the other stories he's adapted this season have been closer to the original. This just takes the idea of someone who's able to change their appearance, and then he basically ran with that idea. And as I've discussed in some of my other reviews, I've learned in the course of my research for my reviews for Twilight Zone, he was a very quick writer, Rod Serling was, and he didn't do many drafts. He would maybe do 2 drafts to a story. And so what happens there, from my own personal experiences, the quality becomes very uneven. Sometimes you can nail it in 2 drafts, and sometimes you don't quite get there. And I think because Act 1, Act 2, and Act 3 are very unrelated, that's the result of quick writing. Not being able to spend time to think about how you can go within the roots of the character and make the transition between the different acts make more sense, foreshadow them and pay things off, rather than having to use contrived meetings between characters. And that's what happens here for Act 2 and Act 3. And now that I've given you my brief review, let's go into the plot of the story. The plot summary is courtesy of Gary K. MCD on imdb.com. And here is his, or her, I'm assuming Gary is a him, his summary of the episode. Arch Hammer arrives in the city and checks into a seedy motel. He looks like any other man, but looks can be deceiving. Hammer has the ability to change his appearance at whim, a trick he definitely uses to his own advantage. He takes on the appearance of the recently deceased musician Johnny Foster, who died in a car accident. He goes to meet Maggie, a lounge singer who is mourning Foster's death, and convinces her to run off with him. And I'm going to stop reciting the review here just to say that I really like the actress who played Maggie. I thought she had the best performance in the episode, and the lighting and cinematography of that scene of them at the table, I felt really elevated that scene, and that was my favorite scene in the whole episode, that scene between those two. He then takes on the appearance of Verge Sterrig, a gangster whose bullet-riddled body was recently found in the river. He then visits mob boss Pennell, who double-crossed him to get his share of the money from their most recent job. I'm assuming now, this is not the review, this is me, I'm assuming his intention was to use that money to finance running off with the lounge singer, but I don't think it's ever stated in the episode. An unplanned change of face doesn't go over well, however, and that's the end of the review. And I will say there that dovetails into my main criticism of the episode, because that is the end of Act 2. So Act 2 ends when Arch Hammer does a sloppy short arm robbery of the mob boss, he allows the henchman of the mob boss who's in the room to run off and get two thugs to come in. So if he had better planning, he would have made sure everyone in the room was secure in that room and could not go off to get any help. So the reason that he sloppily executes that is the plot needs for him to flee from that room and assume a face, because his next identity is going to lead into the conclusion of the story. So he runs from the mob boss, goes into an alley, and suddenly he can't think of any face than the one he has. Not even his own. He can't even become Arch Hammer for whatever reason. So he has to adopt, the face here on the poster. I'll be this guy. Even though we saw on the bed, he had a picture of all these people he was planning to turn into at some point. He suddenly can't remember any of those. So he becomes that boxer, and that gets him out of trouble with the mob boss's thugs. But lo and behold, all he has to do is walk out of the alley, turn a corner, and he runs into the proprietor of a newsstand, who coincidentally is the father of the boxer whose identity is just assumed. Contrived. And after he manages to shake loose the father, go back to his hotel, a detective shows up. Where was this? Where do we hear that Arch Hammer was fleeing a detective from Chicago? We never heard it. The detective leads them out to take him to the station, and Arch Hammer gets him caught in some revolving doors, changes into the boxer. I don't know why the boxer, could have been anyone else. Suddenly he's fixated on being the boxer, and that shakes the detective loose. But lo and behold, the father, who Arch Hammer had left pushed to the sidewalk, when we see the father last, he's just sitting morosely crying on the sidewalk. Oh, he's followed Arch Hammer to the hotel. Or if he hasn't followed him, somehow he knows this is the place to find his son. And then he shoots Arch Hammer dead. At that point, still, Arch Hammer has the face of the boxer, his son. And that's the end of the story for Arch Hammer. He dies, does the werewolf transformation. We see all the faces that he's been, and then he dies as Arch Hammer. End of story. So, Rod Serling, to make this idea work of somehow the sin of lying and assuming the identity of others is the sins of those identities are going to come back to Arch Hammer. That's the moral component. You can't get away with lying as another person without also assuming the consequences of their behavior. And if you assume the identity of someone who is involved in a bad world, that sin will come back to you. I assume that's the moral premise of the episode. And I think that moral premise is pretty clear. That's fine. Just the execution, it needed more time spent making clear that these things were not random. That when he assumed the identity of the boxer, that's because his next con was going to be for the father of the newsstand. He would have reason to meet that father. And then in fleeing from the father could have pulled something from the jacket, would have been the matchbox for the hotel, so that he would know to go find his son there. All that would have made much more sense. And even that pulling the matchbox from the jacket of the boxer would have been contrived, but it would have been a better way to get the father to the hotel than what is presented to us. So yeah, I think the final verdict for me on this episode is the writing. Not enough time going through the weeds of how you are going to make all these characters align so that the story is foreshadowed. That is, the transition from Act 1 to Act 2 is foreshadowed and motivated by the characters, not by contrivance. And we would have had more of a stake in Arch Hammer. At the end, we don't really have much of a stake. The only time we have a stake with him is in his seduction of the singer. That's the only time where we see a softer side for him. And even then, it's not very soft because it just seems like he's trying to take advantage of her. So we don't have much of attachment for Arch Hammer, and the plot is contrived. So in the end, you get a score like 7.2 on IMDb. I think I can stop there. So if you have a different feeling, if you enjoyed the episode or you saw something different than me that you think redeems the episode, please leave a comment below. I'm always eager to hear people who have thoughts about Twilight Zone. And my approach to this is the writing foremost and the other elements secondary. So that's why I spend so much time discussing the plots and the screenplay writing. And that's it. Okay, so until next time, take care and be well. Goodbye.